One of the candidates running for Duncan Hunter's 50th district seat is DeMaio. He joins us this morning to discuss Hunter's plea deal and the impact it could have on the race.
Mr. DeMaio, good morning.
Good morning.
Not to be an apologist for Mr. Hunter, but if we examined every active congressman and woman, their campaign records and finances, and we went through it with the same fine-tooth comb that Mr. Hunter's was, obviously, how much campaign fraud like this would we find?
Oh, you would likely find additional members of Congress have abused their campaign accounts as personal piggy banks. As part of my entry into this race, I said that we can't just look at Duncan Hunter's misconduct and hold him accountable. And I'm grateful that he's making the right decision for his family, but he's also making the right decision for his constituents in pleading guilty, in finally accepting responsibility for his actions, and allowing his district to move on and have a real voice in Congress that's not distracted by corruption or a criminal trial. But more importantly, he is a symbol now of, I hope, a change, that we are going to hold politicians accountable for living under the same laws as you and me. I mean, think about it. If you got the KUSI credit card out, and there's only a few of them around here, and you misused that credit card to the tune of $250,000 that you embezzled from your corporate funds, $250,000 over a period of time, what would happen to you? Would you keep your job? No. Would they allow you to keep the credit card? No. You would be fired, they'd cut up the credit card, and you would, very quickly, not over a period of 3 years like we just saw, you would be very quickly held accountable for your actions. Members of Congress have been getting by with all sorts of bad behavior because they feel that they're entitled. I'm a member of Congress, I deserve it. No, you don't. You make the laws, you should comply with the laws. And so I think what we're seeing, and I hope that this is a trend, a larger trend, is that the Department of Justice and law enforcement will be looking at full compliance with members of Congress on all laws. We need to eliminate the exemptions. We need to make sure that they don't have the special privileges and the double standards. And so in my 10-point plan, the Fix Congress First initiative, what it does is it changes a lot of the oversight. Right now, the Federal Election Commission doesn't have auditors. They don't look at the books. They don't look at the campaign reports of members of Congress. They need to audit. Maybe not every committee, but randomly select so that the members of Congress know that someone's watching, someone's looking at the money. The only reason why Mr. Hunter got into trouble is because the media saw, teenager video games on his campaign disclosures, and they said, "This doesn't look like a campaign expense," and it started a trickle effect of the media pulling at the yarn of a sweater and figuring out that there was a lot of personal expenses that were being booked to or billed to his campaign. And so it's a sad end to Mr. Hunter's political career. And I'm grateful that he is finally taking responsibility. And now we need to move forward. And that's important, that we look at how do we get a member of Congress in that district who will be a fighter. One thing I admire about Duncan Hunter and his father, they were fighters. They are fighters. And I think that the district deserves someone who's going to be tenacious and principled in representing their views, because a lot of those voters out there feel for the longest time that they've been voiceless, particularly here in California where you have one-party control. They feel like no one represents their views in Sacramento or in Washington, and they want a fresh start. And I think my candidacy has been offering them that, and that's why we're getting a lot of traction and leading in the polls.
And so looking forward, one of the biggest questions is, the indications are that he will resign. The question is when. That would leave that seat vacant. What does that do to the seat moving forward and for whoever is next to win the 50th district?
My hope is that he doesn't drag this out any further. We've already seen 3 years of dragging things out. My hope is that we see a resignation in the next few days, if not today. That would, under the law, trigger a special election. Fortunately, Governor Gavin Newsom cannot appoint the replacement. It must be a special election if the seat is vacated 1 year out of the new term or the close of filing. That would be this Friday. The close of filing is this Friday. So if Mr. Hunter resigns, by Friday, and some are arguing by next Friday because if he decides not to file for re-election, his seat filing period is extended by 7 days, just a legal technicality. We will get a special election March 3rd. Now, it's a little complicated because you'll get a ballot, and there will be two 50th District congressional races on the same ballot. You're looking at the piece of paper. The first one says, who do you vote for the unexpired term? The second one says, who do you vote for the fresh term, the new term? That begins January 2021. So it can be a little complicated, but hey, we'll make sure people know what they're voting on. And I feel confident that we will retain the seat into the Republican column. And I fully expect to run a vigorous campaign to earn the trust and support of the voters of the 50th District, to be their next voice. In theory, if this all goes according to plan, we can get a new member of Congress in April or May. That would be the time frame.
You know, you talk about earning trust. Does this kind of just turn voters away and say, you know what, I don't even want to vote on this. I'm just disgusted by politics, by what's going on. Does it bring out more Republicans? I mean, how do you, in your view, and I can probably guess what you're going to say,
right,
but how do you think that this changes things as far as who's coming out and the numbers for the 50th District? I mean, there's a lot of Republicans in the race.
Yeah, it should make voters furious that there's a double standard in Washington. And so I blame the Republicans for not going to their colleague, Duncan Hunter, early on 3 years ago and saying, dude, what the hell did you do? You got to get out. You know why they didn't do that? Because, as Paul alluded to in the beginning, many of them may have the same sort of problems. You know, it's a cozy system. They take care of each other.
But do you think to that extent?
Oh, well, certainly not to that extent. But then let's look at Speaker Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is Speaker. She could have at any time gone to the House floor and said, I make a motion to vacate the 50th District. That would trigger a special election. It would have put pressure on Mr. Hunter to do a deal sooner. She didn't do that. Why? Because she also, and her party also, wants the cozy system. These are politicians who, no matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they like to take care of their own. It's a swampy system. And so you see some of the candidates, frankly, that I'm up against, kind of saying, oh, the wife did it early on. Mr. Issa came out and said, oh, Mr. Hunter didn't do anything wrong. It was his wife. Oh, how convenient. Take care of your buddy, the swampy little system. And so the reason why I got into this race is I was peed off, okay? I was angry by this behavior because Mr. Hunter and all members of Congress should be back there fighting for the issues their constituents sent them there to solve, not living the rich life, not breaking the law or covering up for themselves or being distracted by scandal.
You bring up Mr. Issa.
Yeah.
He was, in his last visit here, kind of poked fun a little bit at a candidate in the race that always had a 10-point, 8-point, 5-point plan.
I know. What?
Would you like to respond to his policy that he's going to
he doesn't have a plan. He's basically what he said.
He's going to be more flexible and will adjust as situation warrants.
Okay, so my first reaction when I watched that interview was, wow, he's swampy. Because remember what he said, Paul? You said the swamp. You actually used the term the swamp. I was like, go, Paul. And you're right. It's a swampy system. What he said, yeah, a lot of things get done behind closed doors. And because I have 18 years experience, I know how to navigate and I can work with both parties. Baloney. What did your 18 years give us? No progress on the border. In fact, he opposed the border wall. He said it was unnecessary. He was the first and only Republican to call for a special prosecutor to be appointed against President Trump. He bought into the whole phony Russia collusion narrative, and look what that's done in terms of pain and distraction for the president's agenda. And so I looked at that interview and I was like, okay, dude, if you want to be the swamp creature here, go right ahead and run on that. What I was disappointed in was he mocked the idea that I'm out there offering 3-point plans, 5-point plans, 10-point plans on issues that people care about. Securing the border, we have a 5-point plan on that. Protecting our Second Amendment rights, a 5-point plan on that supported by the San Diego County gun owners. A 3-point plan for dealing with the Tijuana River Valley sewage problems. We came here and did my Obamacare replacement plan called Freedom Care. If it's an issue that you're concerned about, my job is to make sure I have a solution. Now, it may not be the solution everyone likes, but I have to at least start out with an idea of how I would solve the problem and offer it constructively. And so if he says we should mock the guy with the plans, okay, because guess what? Too many times members of Congress haven't had a plan. They have rhetoric, they have fancy words, but they don't actually have a plan, and they also don't put action behind any of their ideas.
Carl, thank you for coming in this morning. Appreciate it. We're going to take a quick look at all the candidates in the race for the 50th congressional district seat. The race has certainly gotten more and more interesting. Carl, thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Carol.